What am I to make of this? A man, dead and decaying in a tree. He's been stripped of his belongings and stripped of his identity. In the introduction to the game Disco Elysium, Harriet Dubois has just learned that he is a cop after suffering amnesia from an apocalyptic night of drugs and alcohol. And so he looks upon this corpse with clear eyes, untainted by a lifetime of sorrow. I am not Harriet Dubois, however. His perspective can change. He has time over the next few days, weeks, months, and years to develop a new perspective on life. I already have one. We are outsiders to the worlds of the games we play. We see these digital realms through the blurry lens of our lives and our social contexts. We look upon games, and we find a world that exists only as a representation of an idea. We call this a perspective. In essence, all our interactions with games come down to matters of perspective. I think it is necessary then to investigate perspective on its most fundamental level, the visual representation of the game we are playing. What actually are we looking at when we play a game? What is seen and what is unseen? Or more to the point, what is shown and what is hidden? Developers do not make such decisions lightly, and while I do not claim that any of the examples used in this video were expressly intended by the creators, I do suggest that they may be a subconscious result of the way the developers think about perspective. At the very least, they contain an idea that I think is worth sharing. It is easy to become mired in talking about what various perspectives show us, without mentioning what they don't show us. And thus, I'm going to throw you in the deep end here, and talk about the game in other waters. So let's dive right in, shall we? The most striking thing about this game upon first glance is its violently minimalist presentation. You have a topographical map of the ocean, a sciencey heads-up display, and that's it. Immediately we are forced to perceive this ocean in a way unlike anything else we see on Earth. In Other Waters takes place in the vibrant alien ocean of the planet Gliese 677cc, sometime in the far indeterminate future. But despite this tantalizing opportunity to see humans' first contact with life beyond Earth, we are restricted to viewing these alien lifeforms as nothing but blips on a radar. You play not as Ellery Vass, the xenobiologist mysteriously called to this unmentioned planet by a former co-worker gone AWOL, but instead, you play as the AI installed on their dive suit. This is why the game looks so Spartan. You have only radars and other sensors to see this alien world. This forced view of the planet encourages us to understand it with a new perspective. This isn't an ocean to be gawked at. It is more than just pretty. You will feel its beauty without ever seeing it. It is a planet to be studied and revered. It is a planet that demands we treat it with careful consideration. It is a planet that we cannot understand without listening to what it has to say to us. We'll only listen close enough if we do not let ourselves be distracted by this paradise. And so, you log the many species you encounter, map the ocean, study the reefs, and grow to understand the complex ecosystem at play. And slowly, you start to realize the planet is whispering something that you can only hear now that you are listening closely. There is a great mystery here. Something terrible has happened, and it will take a careful eye to uncover it. The dead man hangs in the tree. Harry lacks a framework for interpreting this situation, but I do not. I have already seen that this has happened in a poor town behind a worn-down hostel, and the cops are days late to the scene of the crime. These are things Harry has seen as well, of course, but I see them with baggage. Poorer neighborhoods have higher rates of crimes due to countless socio-economic factors. Already primed to draw lines between how this crime is a result of normal people put in awful situations due to wealth inequality, I'm already painting a picture of what would have happened in the hostel the night of the murder. I also know that Harry is a cop. And while Harry does not yet know the social context of police, especially in poorer towns, I do. Despite Harry being the protagonist in a highly sympathetic situation, all my alarm bells are going off. I'm suspicious he's one of the bastard cops. I'm already terrified of all the ways that I'm going to make this wreck of a man further ruin the lives of poor people stuck between a rock and a hard place. My camera looks down upon the yard. It looks down at the tree with the dead man. It looks down at the child throwing rocks against the bloated corpse. It does not move. It does not falter. The moment I opened the game, I had been cast as an observer, here to judge the country of Rivachol, its streets, its denizens, and its history. The isometric view promises a lie. On the one hand, we are looking down. Everything that happens is our fault. You are the eye from up above, the game tells us. You can see everything, and yet you fail to play your role as God. On the other hand, an isometric view only reveals so much. You cannot rotate the camera. It cannot see behind objects. It cannot show us every side of the issue. And thus, you cannot peek behind the curtain. Disco Elysium shows us through its presentation that while we can change the world, and we can change ourselves, doing this is not so easy. It takes more than one reformed cop to start a revolution. It takes more than one perspective on the matter. It takes more than what the game gives you. But it does not mean such endeavors are impossible. You just need a change in perspective. It is a story for another time. I want to use this lens to address some criticisms towards the game Spec Ops: The Line. This game has been talked to death, especially regarding the way it frames accountability and evil. The most popular criticism of the game's moral core is that it blames you for actions it forces you to take. Spoilers ahead. Skip to the timestamp above to avoid them. I'll give you a second. About 2/3 into the game, you find yourself aiming a white phosphorus missile at an enemy encampment. Only, it's not just that. There are also countless civilians that you are not aware of. As you aim the missile, you see your face reflected back at you in the laptop screen, but you cannot continue without firing. Sure, you could close the game. That's never a satisfying choice, is it? The argument I hear time and time again is that the game proceeds to guilt trip you for this horrific crime when it gave you no choice. It calls you a murderer, and it revels in showing the grotesque consequences of your actions. I disagree with this stance, however, because I do not think that Spec Ops: The Line asks the player to ever consider the protagonist's actions as their own. What I have conveniently left out in my description of the events thus far is that you do not control a faceless character meant to be a player surrogate. The protagonist, Walker, has his own motivations, his own problems, and his own life. You may be controlling him, but that's not because the game wants you to feel responsible for him. It is so that you feel empathetic towards him. Spec Ops does not want you to take accountability for Walker's crimes. It only invites you to wonder. What would I do differently? What do I wish I could have made Walker do? I believe it is no coincidence then that Spec Ops is a third-person shooter. It is a game where the camera, aka our perspective into the world, is not within Walker himself. We are external to his struggles and perspectives. The literal way that we observe Walker encourages us to distance ourselves from him. We are placed apart from his struggle. I do believe that this is an intentional attempt on the behalf of the designers to make sure that we are not forced to take accountability for an action we did not wish to transpire. We are watching the many failures of this one man. Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts 2019 was, until this year, the latest installment in a long line of largely soulless games. I received it on the Humble Bundle, already expecting to be disappointed. And make no mistake, despite knowing it would be bad, I was still let down. The stealth is awful, the AI is bonkers, and the levels are unintuitive to navigate. Most importantly, however, the story was neo-libertarian, militant garbage. Who are you? The nameless ghost warrior sniper. What do? You kill people. Who are these people? According to your employer, corrupt, money-hoarding leaders of a failed revolution in Scandinavia, and their many lifeless guards. Who is your employer?
Which one are we working for?
The one who's paying. Does it matter who or what they are?
Stop asking questions, says the game. You are here to do a job. Stop looking at the world around you. Stop taking other things into consideration. That is out of the scope of this mission. Scope. You spend half the game staring through your scope. What does that tell us? The scope of a sniper rifle does two things. It limits your peripheral vision and enhances a distant image. A necessary component of this is that you are indeed at a distance from the subject. The player character, referred to quite ironically as Seeker, is a complete outsider to the central conflict of the story. He is, in this sense, placed at a distance from the conflict, both figuratively and literally. He's encouraged not to empathize with those he kills.
The world will not miss them.
The scope magnifies its subject as well, though. This cannot be ignored. What then does this tell us, considering it would seem to contradict what I just said? I would argue that the magnification has a subtle yet important effect on the way the player forms their judgments of the targets. We are made to focus on these people in waiting for them to fail, waiting for them to do something stupid that gives us an opportunity to take them out. And when they do, we don't hesitate. Symbolically, we are told also to view these people not as human beings who may make human mistakes, but as entities doomed to fail, doomed to cause themselves and others grief. And when they do, we are there to mop them up. Finally, we have the fact that your peripherals are limited through the scope. You do not see the extenuating circumstances. You do not see the complex web you are disturbing. And most importantly, the reason I chose to include this game in the video, you do not, under any circumstances, see outside the paradigm you have been presented by your employer. This is where the horror of the game lies. The failings and evils of these Scandinavian dictators are indeed evil and worthy of our scorn, but we are not even given the opportunity to turn our sights on the hand that guides us. We do not ask who employs us. We do not think about the larger picture. We never ask if we are being given one side of the story. We magnify and scrutinize the actions of our presented enemy, lest our seeker turns his scope on his mysterious benefactors. The complex world of revolution, politics, and diplomacy is flattened in the scope of our seeker. And this game is shallow for that reason. The game fails to notice the symbolic questions its mechanics ask, and thus it falls utterly flat. Nothing but a time waster when it could have made truly insightful points about the war industry, dictatorships, and global capitalism. Dujana does not shy away from difficult truths and harsh criticism. I made a whole video on this game. It's one of the better games I have ever played, to be quite honest. Dujana is a game about a Middle Eastern mother who lost her husband and daughter a week prior. You find yourself exploring the neighbouring settlements, a pair of towns, a cave network, a military camp, a factory, and an uninhabited desert. It is all rendered in a top-down perspective, as you can see. Jana, a game released in 2017, explores many themes: the horrors of military occupation, toxic masculinity, motherhood, loss, existentialism, spirituality, and more. The game also lacks much direction at all. There is a simple list of places to visit that can be filled in any order, and on a smaller level, each area itself is similarly fractured into disparate elements. An area will have a general theme, but it will explore that theme in a disorienting mirage of vignettes and jarring changes to presentation. The word that comes to mind is overview. Dujana has a task at hand. She must find her husband and daughter. She doesn't have time to delve into the complexities of the lives of each person she encounters. The game is top-down. We get an overview of the world around Dujana. A sense of depth is sacrificed for the sake of showing us a more holistic image. Another effect of the zoomed out, top-down perspective is that Dejana herself looks very small on the screen, just as she feels very small in this complex world. It is never stated outright, but I believe that Dejana feels overwhelmed by the country she lives in. There is so much around her, and she doesn't understand any of it. I believe some of these frustrations are addressed in the scene where she, with the prodding and empowerment of the sisters, allows herself to fantasize about slaughtering the soldiers of the militarized zone, full of US Army occupiers. The cold snap back to reality only makes Dejana seem smaller. It's as if the realization that it was just a daydream acts as a reminder that she does not truly hold agency in her life. Okay, I've already been skirting at the edge of what is and isn't a spoiler, so from here on out, there are major spoilers. I will be discussing the ending to Dejana, many of the reveals in Spec Ops: The Line, and I will be speaking about the mystery of In Other Waters that I hinted at earlier. These are some incredibly well-written games. I believe I've gotten a lot of my point across, so if you want to skip to the conclusion now, I won't be upset. For those of you who remain, consider the ending of Dejana. Dejana is told to look for her husband and daughter in the desert, and what she finds isn't just their remains. She also finds perspective. Suddenly, all this searching around an incomprehensible world starts to make sense. She claims that she wakes to blindness. She damns the sky, the sand, and her skin as deceivers. She is suffused with anger and anguish at the impossible event. But as the camera pulls out, we see that there is an order to this mess of a world. It is not a kind order, but an order nonetheless. The universe commands one thing of her. Keep marching. Your life lies not buried in the desert. Dejana is not the only game with the desert to cover all sorrow. Spec Ops: The Line takes place in a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai fallen to ruin. Or, by another interpretation, Spec Ops: The Line takes place directly in hell. The symbolism is not subtle, it's barely even subtext, it's supertext. This war-torn Dubai is home only to the damned, and Walker is chief among the damned. Walker is the ultimate evil, the king of Sodom, and thus this hellscape serves only to punish him. Endlessly he is given hope that redemption lies just around the corner, and that with it, an end will be brought to all suffering in the city. And time after time he causes nothing but slaughter. This paves the way for another method through which Spec Ops explores perspective. Our perception of reality is also thrown into question. Hallucinations begin to plague Walker. He sees the faces of his comrades on enemy soldiers. He is overcome with fits of violence, and he hallucinates entire scenarios. In one scene, he is faced with two individuals tied up with snipers trained on their heads. The radio man tells him that he has to choose one of them to live and one to die. It is revealed later in the game, however, that this was a hallucination too, his subconscious tormenting him out of guilt. The final reveal of the game is where we see the true extent of how this hellscape has been warping Walker's perception. Colonel John Conrad, the leader of the damned 33rd, and the one who started this regime amidst the storm, has been dead for a long time. Everything Walker has done has been in vain, a struggle against an absent adversary. Walker is in hell. Reality is not as it seems, truth is an illusion, and everything here exists only to punish Walker for his sins. There is only one solace for Walker. The storm wall that shrouds Dubai ensures that his crimes will stay hidden from history. Or so he can hope. The abstracted lens we view the oceans of In Other Waters hides information from the player. It is a subtractive worldview. The player cannot look any closer at the world unless it is clearly telegraphed to them. Nodes either can or cannot be inspected. This makes it very easy to hide information in plain sight. Spend much of In Other Waters believing that there is no antagonist. There is simply the wide, untamed ocean to explore, and the mystery of Minane, your co-worker, to uncover. But as the game progresses, the monster in the shadows begins to reveal itself. It turns out that this undiscovered planet is not as undiscovered as you had thought. The Space Exploration Corporation, Baikal, had already landed there, set up laboratories and even factories where they made biofuel out of the unique alien life. The potential profits of a whole planet of biofuel was too much for them to resist. And so they ignored every protocol. They did not listen to the environmental scientists, and they did not build their infrastructure up to scratch. It was only a matter of time before tragedy struck. A massive bloom of the bacterial microbes they were breeding ruptured their reactor tanks, and leaked a catastrophic amount of acidic material into the ocean. It would have wiped out all life on the planet, were it not for a highly adaptive animal that was able to save the ecosystem. And thanks to that animal, life beyond Earth was preserved. The Baikal workers died in the bloom, and the corporation never leaked word of the tragedy to the public. It makes more sense now, the way that the game is presented to us. The dive suit AI that you play as is itself Baikal tech. This hyper-minimal view of the world is thanks to Baikal. They hid their disaster from humanity, and so too did they hide the truth from you. The narrative struggle of this game is one between corporations and the environment, but the thematic struggle is between wishing to see what has been deliberately hidden. The oceans of Gliese, 677cc endure, and its endless beauty is visible, no matter how you perceive it. On the surface, it almost seems like a non-statement to say that the way games are presented to us affects how we interpret them. But I don't think we often stop to consider by what means this is true and to what extent. And the more I realize this, the more I just can't stop thinking about it. I wanted to talk about more than twice as many games in this video. Even without them, this is still the longest essay I have written yet. I wanted to talk about Universal Paperclips, Hotline Miami, Colossal Cave Adventure, the VR mod for Alien Isolation, Dwarf Fortress, God of War, and more. But fittingly, I think it's better to just leave you with a new perspective on the matter. I've hopefully given you a lens, something to remind yourself of every time you find a game worth analysing critically. I want you to ask yourself how the camera frames the events, what it reveals and what it hides. Think of how Disco Elysium uses its isometric camera to imply that you cannot understand the whole world, and you can only see one side of the matter. I want you to ask yourself what the camera says about how the developer wants you as a player to feel connected to the events. Like how the player is implied to not be accountable for Walker's actions in Spec Ops: The Line. I also want you to ask yourself how the rendering abstracts information. Is something deliberately being withheld from you, as in Other Waters? What does this say about the narrative? Ask yourself how the camera prioritizes information on the screen, like how Dejana is shown to be small and insignificant in a wider world of loose ends. Most importantly though, I want you to make your own connections. I think I have learned a very valuable lesson about perspective in writing this. It is very easy to take for granted the perspective we are given when we play a game, considering that it is in many ways the primary action of interpreting the game on a physical level. It fades into the background. But it is precisely because of this that we must give it the attention and scrutiny it deserves. The perspective is the intermediary actor between the constructed world and the audience. It is the filter, or perhaps the better term is translator. The perspective we as players are given translates our world to us, a world we could never truly know, one that the artist wishes to share with us anyway. And thus, the perspective is the tool the creator uses to communicate the integral experiences of the world they wish to show you. Developers must place a profound amount of trust on the perspective. It is only fair, then, that we treat it with the respect that it deserves. Thanks so much for watching. I'm so sorry this one took so long. I had a lot going on in my life. and it didn't help that I got all the way to the video editing part of a whole nother essay before realizing it was awful. If you liked the video, it'd make my day if you subscribed, or even better, shared it with a friend. It really helps. I would also like to thank my wonderful, beautiful, amazing patrons who all donate $1 or more each video. Bound Internal, Chocolope, Cthulhu Sauce, Eli Berg Mars, Ethan Soul Trester, Graham Harrison, Kirby, Leslie Howard, Lycan Arrowsmith, Moss, Paige Harvey, Taylor, Toby. You can become one of these lovely patrons by following the link in the description. Patrons get access to my Discord server, which is full of immaculate vibes, as well as a couple other benefits at other tiers. Once again, thanks so much for watching. Have a good one.